Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the English Hour. In this episode, we'll talk about learning to learn. And I think it's such an essential skill in our world because the world is developing rapidly and professions, jobs, tasks, expectations, everything is changing, and I think that makes learning more essential and more important than ever. What do you think, Canberk?
Well, hello guys. I totally agree. I mean, learning has to be an active part of our daily lives, not even like monthly or yearly. You can have yearly goals if you're a company, for example. We want to make like 20% more profit, or we want to cut, our budget for unnecessary things by, 50% or something. Very much streamlining the company.
Yeah.
If you're a person, you should really make learning a priority. If you're a professional, the same goes for professionals as well. If you're an academic or a student, that's your job. So here's my abstract on this. If you want to learn effectively, you're going to have to learn how to do it.
Yes.
And take learning as something that you learn. Like, you want to learn how to bike, you go ahead and learn how to do it. If you want to learn how to do calligraphy, for example, then you're going to go ahead and engage in this learning process. If you want to do all of these things effectively and efficiently, then you're going to invest some time and effort and thinking and thought about how you are learning, like
that
becoming more
true.
Aware. So
okay, I've got something to add here. And I think, for example, most students go to school, like start primary school, then high school, then college, and so on. But I think learning generally happens unconsciously. I mean, people, when they're expected to learn something, they simply start reading without really thinking about the concept of learning and how to optimize their learning. For example, we have classes such as like geography, math, science, and so on. But I think before giving students those classes, it would serve them much better if we can teach them, or if we can teach ourselves how to learn effectively. Because if you learn how to learn effectively, how to do research, how to take notes, how to read for information, how to analyze information. So these are essential skills, not just for academia, but also for personal life and development. So if we can teach people how to learn effectively, then I think they can make better use of their time. For example, these days, I'm inspired to learn photography.
that's right.
And fortunately, I've got a lot of learning experience in other fields. So I know how to learn. So I know where to look for information. I know how to take notes. I know what is important and what is not. So I guess I can make quick progress compared to most other people, instead of being like swarmed with information, because we are surrounded by tons of information, and you can easily get lost and like lose your orientation. But I know how to find my way around the corners of knowledge, so to speak, and that makes the whole thing much easier. But if you don't know how to learn, and if you've got so much information around you, especially in this day and age, then you'll be lost. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I can attest to your ability to navigate knowledge on the net, because I've seen firsthand when we had that little chat, meaning 45 minutes, about photography. I've realized, okay, just in like 2 days and nights, this person is like up to speed with what's going on in the industry, the camera purchases, camera market, and things like that. I was impressed. So the larger discussion, I believe it is, so crystal clear. The idea about learning to learn, you can't argue against that. It is so fundamental. I think what we can go ahead and talk about is that we can give some practical tips.
You know what? I was
strategies
thinking about the same.
How to do it, because it's so fundamental that it is really, at this point, it's sine qua non. It's something that you can't really argue against. So we might as well go ahead and talk about how we do it, how we try to incorporate that into our lives.
Well, the thing is, like, just as you were talking about our experience, our little talk, I was like, well, this this conversation is very theoretical. Like, we should give people something that they can grasp, something that they can use. And then when you mentioned practical examples, I think that really serves an immense need.
I agree.
So I think in today's world, like, Google is a gatekeeper to information, because nowadays we don't really go to libraries. We just Google it. So I think one of the essential skills is to learn how to use a search engine effectively. Would you agree with that?
That is, I think, an important point to make.
I think because it's your gateway to information, because without using a search engine effectively, without being able to make the right queries, like right searches, you will not get what you're looking for.
That's right.
That's personally, for me, that's the very first step. So what do you think? What do you start? How do you start?
Yeah, all right. So the very first step, that's going to depend on how you look at it from on your perspective. If we're talking about surfing the internet, if we're talking about being an online citizen, I think learning to use the search engine is fundamental, is essential. So you're right in that. I would take it even further, like, back. I would say learning to learn has a lot to do with reading. And reading, what I mean by reading is reading mechanically, this physical reading that we do, from pages on the internet, but at the same time, really learning how to digest and use the material that you get from reading, from the reading experience, because it is so important. I mean, anything you search online, if you put in the right query, for example, and you come up, it brings up certain results and you recognize them as being useful, and then you're going to go ahead and use them. And how are you going to use them? You're going to use them by reading and trying to understand, and then trying to commit the important bits and pieces to memory. All of this has to do with reading. So if you want to get better at learning, you have to first learn how to read effectively. So I think this is like very much to the core.
I think another complementary skill is knowing how to ask the right questions.
That's
because
right.
The right questions will lead you in the right direction. So, like, for the sake of example, I'll just refer to the digital camera example. So, for example, I wanted to learn about digital cameras like DSLRs and other types of cameras. So, when I started learning about this, so I went to Google. Instead of just searching for a specific camera type, I started searching for camera types, or the comparison of DSLRs with mirrorless cameras, with point and shoot cameras. So when I had that general comparison between different types, then I had a better grasp of the whole ecosystem.
That's right.
And if you can find it, it's always useful to have a look at a guide. So on the internet, you can find a lot of guides on pretty much any topic, a comprehensive guide on something. So it's very useful to read that, just to have a broad overview of the things. If you're a visual learner, you can go to YouTube and probably you'll find a comparison of different like camera types, lenses and stuff. So the way I go about it is like starting from the top and learning the main types, main categories, and then when I know the main categories based on my needs, I can go one way or the other instead of like learning each specific detail. For example,
first you have to reach the top.
That is true.
Look down.
Because, for example, for my purposes, when I looked at the camera types, I realized that a point and shoot camera, a regular camera, is not suitable for my purposes. So it's logical, practical for me to just leave that part out. And then I could focus on mirrorless cameras and the DSLRs, and then I could compare them, and then I was able to look at the price range and the lenses. And then when you start comparing like mirrorless cameras to DSLRs, then you have to learn about like the aperture, f-stop, iris, or ISO and other details, or the shutter speed, and how that really affects the whole capture, the whole scene, the photograph and the raw data, and so on. So when you know what you're looking for, and if you have the general picture, it's like I think of that as using a map. So, like, you take out a map, the map gives you everything, right?
That's very much the metaphor that I use.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and then, so you've got the map in front of you, and you look at the map and you say, well, I'd like to go to this place, and that's how I do it. So I choose my destination, I've got the general overview, and then I can really focus on or zero in on that point and just learn things. So
okay,
that's basically
great. That's
an
a
overview.
great practical example. I'm going to give you another practical example that's about a test, because that's what a lot of people are up against.
Oh, that's
so
true.
there's an exam coming up, and you're going to have to study for it. It could be a class, a university course. It could be something even bigger, like a university entrance exam, or it could be like a driving license exam, something like that.
Can I say something?
Sure.
For example, like, this will be sort of funny and flattering at the same time. So, like, I got my driver's license with two of my classmates when I was in my senior year at college.
Yeah.
So, and basically, we did not study for the written test, and we had 2 days before the test, and me and my friends, like, we did not really attend the classes, like, we didn't have time for that, and we had 2 days to prep for the class, for the exam. You remember, of course, my classmates, they were yours too, so
yeah, exactly.
we prepped for the exam for 2 days, like less than 2 days, but since we had a lot of experience with, like, multiple choice exams and test taking and what comes up and what doesn't, we were able to, like, score some of the highest grades in the school. So, like, there was this driving school students who attended all the classes, worked really hard and so on, but we prepped for 2 days and we got some of the highest grades.
That's pretty amazing, yeah, in 2 days.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That was fun.
A lot of people fail that test, you know that, right?
I know that.
Even university graduates and stuff, like, some of the most intelligent people I see around me, they say, okay, I've never had the time to, prepare at all, and then they go in and they fail.
That happens.
Yeah. So here's the thing. In my case, I was actually looking into how to get a motorcycle driving license. Okay, I've been a car driver for 10 years now, and I've been pretty comfortable with it. But the motorcycle has always had that allure to it, that appeal to me. So I've always wanted to do it. Even when I was getting my driver's license back in 2008, I was offered the chance to get both at the same time, and I refused, and I regret that to this day. But at the same time, I'm thinking, like, maybe I can get one, but my wife shouldn't know about that. But whatever. Here's the thing: when you're up against a test, for example, you Google that, right?
Right.
And then it comes up with a lot of choices. But here's the thing: if you know about the contents of the exam, you are much better prepared. Like, even without knowing anything about the topic, the actual content, if you know how the exam itself is organized, you're going to be in a much better position to be successful. And what I mean is this. So the the motorcycle exam is much more complicated, interestingly, because as you probably know, the accidents if you're on a motorcycle can be much more likely to be fatal. Okay, this is a statistic. It's based on real data, and we see that all around us, and it's dangerous. I mean, you're on top of a mechanical horse, and you're, like, driving at 90, 100 kilometers per hour, even much more than that for a lot of people. That's dangerous. But at the same time, because it's so dangerous, you have to be very careful when you're giving out these licenses. And the government realizes that. So they have made this complicated test. It's like a collision course. It's like an obstacle course. And it takes you like 35 minutes, whereas the car driving license test takes, the actual driving I'm talking about, not the written test. Yeah. Because once you take that, you don't have to take it again for motorcycle or any other type of vehicle. But the driving test is difficult. It's like 35 minutes, this obstacle course. You have to do all of these intricate moves through it, and then you have to go into actual traffic and stuff like that. So the thing is, since I know a little bit about how to learn, I don't know anything about bicycles, I mean motorcycles, like the actual driving experience. I don't know anything about the test, but like within an hour or something, I'm able to, take a look at all the stages of the test and get an appreciation for them, and then go ahead and make a few phone calls to driving license tutors, these organizations who prepare you for the exam, and then talk to them about what I can do to minimize the time that it takes for me to get a license, because it's like it could be a month or even longer, but it could be like 2 days if you prepare and if you're ready to go, and if you make the right scheduling decisions, you're good to go in like 2 or 3 days, which is great. And then here's the kicker: if you know what to expect, once you're offered preparation, tutoring, all kinds of stuff, you can ask the right questions, which ties back to the first point that you made. You can say, okay, you're going to teach me how to use the shifter on this motorcycle, but you're talking about using this or teaching me this as the last stage, whereas I need to learn it the first thing, because that's the basic difference between using a motorcycle and using a car, because you have to shift, you have to use the clutch with your hand rather than with your foot, which is the main difference. It kind of confuses you. Yeah. So you're saying, okay, I need to learn this first, but you're telling me I'm going to learn this last. Now that's a problem. So I can, weed out the, bad examples or like the less favorable ones, and I can focus on what I need. So you see, simple things like that can make a difference in terms of how effective, how efficient your process of learning is.
Well, I think you made a great point when you refer to tutors and talking to people, because I think if you know how to ask the right questions, and if you know who to ask those questions, then you can make great progress in a very limited period of time. So, for example, if you can ask someone who's way more knowledgeable than you on a certain topic, then that person can really guide you in the right direction. And instead of spending like months or years on a problem or on an issue, you can solve it pretty quickly. For example, like a couple days ago, I was at Boğaziçi, and I was talking to a research assistant, a friend of mine, and he was asking about some like programming languages and some of the problems he was facing, and I had experience with those problems, and I could easily tell him what to do and what not to do, and I'm sure that saved him like at least 6 months.
Wow.
Because like a little conversation can save you hours. Because for example, if you pick the wrong tool or the wrong method or the wrong book or the wrong approach, then you can really waste a very long period of time. Or for example, when it comes to photography, like as you mentioned, in the morning we were talking about cameras and pros and cons of different models. Well, the nice thing is that, well, I did my research. I know about the topic now. I'm not a total newbie, but then I can ask about different camera types to you. So you've got a lot more experience on the topic. You've tested different cameras, and you can really point me in the right direction. Similarly, so you're prepping for some types of exams coming up, like the graduate exams, I suppose. So like when you ask me about those topics, I can really guide you to the right resources, or I can give you the right mindset. For example, I can tell you which books to focus on, which books to leave out, and that can really save a lot of time. So learning to learn, I think, also involves knowing when to get help, when to ask for help, and when to get guidance, because a person who has experience in your field can really help you progress much faster.
That's right. I totally agree. Okay, so we talked about asking the right questions. We talked about, asking the people with expertise and experience. What else did we talk about? We also mentioned learning how to read and learning how to interpret.
And learning how to use search engines.
Search engines, yeah. And it goes back to the problem or the importance of asking the right questions, because that's how you use a search engine. So here's the thing. I think, when you look at these things, these are not skills that are easy to cultivate. You have to have experience to even start out on them.
And you have to be conscious. It doesn't happen
so that's
automatically.
That's exactly the point that I'm going to make, and you can help me make that point. All of these things, when you talk about asking the right questions, this involves judgment. When you talk about right and wrong, this involves judgment. And how are you going to decide, right? That's the crucial question.
Yeah.
So I think if you're looking for a handle, if you're looking for something to really boost your ability to learn, I think it's going to be awareness, self-awareness, to be exact.
So true.
So anything that you're doing, you're going to have to be aware of what you're doing at all times. Try to cultivate that attitude. Like, I am speaking right now, and I am aware that I'm speaking. I'm aware of the context. I'm aware of my interlocutor. And that's going to help me learn from this. Like, if a novel experience comes across, like it comes up within this, context, I'm going to be able to take something from it, take a lesson from it. So if you want to develop any type of learning to learn skill, any type of, this metacognitive skill at the same time, would you call that?
You can call it a metacognitive skill, because it involves self-awareness, and when it involves self-awareness, you can talk about metacognitive skills.
That's right. So the key is to be aware of what you're doing, because each time you get that realization that, okay, I'm doing this, it's going to make sense to you when you do something else. You will realize, okay, I was doing that. I was reading for 500, I was reading 500 pages on this, for example, to learn about this. And then I took a walk to a tutoring center and talked to somebody who was really experienced in that, like 20 years of experience. And I realized I learned from that person more than I learned from that reading experience. Actually, the conversation took me 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, but the reading took me like 6 hours, maybe even longer than that. But I was able to get more benefit from the conversation. So I realized, okay, I used both methods and I was aware when I was doing them. Then I am able to compare. But if I'm not, aware of what's going on, then I'm going to read and then read more and read more. Like, if I am very lucky, I'm going to come across somebody who's going to have, hold me by the hand and direct me to the right direction.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't rest your chances on luck, right?
That is so true.
You should make a more, considered effort towards success.
I think learning to learn also requires a constant feedback loop, because,
that's right.
As you said, you amass some experience. When you do it, when you learn, when you start to improve your learning skills, you try different methods, and you have to monitor the results. So you monitor the results, and then the next time you're learning something, you get into learning feedback loop. So you might say, well, this worked better, this did not work. And based on the results, you can update your preferences, you can update your methodology. And it requires constant feedback and constant monitoring on your side. But then the nice thing is, after a certain while, it becomes automatic, almost automatic, because you get to learn yourself, you get to learn your strengths and weaknesses, and based on that, and based on previous experience, you learn much faster, and you learn how to go about learning.
That's right. I totally agree. So I think this is a good point to end our conversation.
Yeah.
I think we've touched upon some key points.
And gave a lot of personal examples.
That's right. So let's wrap this up.
Yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed this session, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.